All political systems seek perpetual motion, an enduring return to established order. But stability is never permanence. It is a fragile state of managed friction. For decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran mastered this balancing act, surviving global isolation, economic sanctions, and cyclical internal dissent. The existing political structure was defined by duality. The regime was anchored by the ideologically driven Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which managed the nation's security, economy, and foreign policy through its deep entrenchment. This was complemented by a stable, committed support base, millions of citizens who viewed the government as the guarantor of national identity and unity. Beneath this ideological and military strength lay the traditional military, the Artesh, alongside a complex civilian bureaucracy. This apparatus ensured functional stability, but the system's resilience relied fundamentally on its ability to maintain a basic social contract, stability, and subsidized living costs. This stability was maintained by extracting and distributing national resources, primarily oil and gas. When those resources became constrained, the social contract became fragile. The hidden weakness of the system was purely structural, its inability to adapt to resource depletion and geopolitical isolation simultaneously.
The decay was slow. It was not political, but environmental and economic. For years, Iran faced a deepening critical water crisis. Drought, combined with inefficient agricultural practices, depleted groundwater and caused vital lakes to vanish. This crisis was fundamentally destabilizing. This environmental calamity was intrinsically linked to the growing energy deficit. Pumping increasingly scarce water required vast amounts of power. The energy-intensive process of desalination, combined with aging grid infrastructure, placed unsustainable demands on the national gas supply. Successive governments, constrained by sanctions and prioritizing geopolitical aims, lacked the capital necessary for structural infrastructure reform. This created a feedback loop. Water scarcity increased energy demand, exacerbating the energy deficit. Political solutions proved impossible. Sanctions strangled the economy, limiting access to global markets and currency reserves. The resulting inflation and high unemployment triggered cyclical unrest. Brief, contained protests in 2017, 2019, and 2022. These were not revolutions, but structural fever spikes. The system was failing to manage the friction of resource depletion.
In 2024, the political establishment attempted to adapt. Masoud Pezeshkian, a reformist, was elected president on a platform of re-engagement and sanctions relief. He represented the hope that internal political adaptation could mend the economic fractures. His failure was guaranteed by the very structure he sought to reform. Any concession required to secure a renewed nuclear deal was opposed by the powerful hardline core and the IRGC, who viewed compromise as ideological surrender. The negotiations stalled, defined by maximalist demands that neither side could politically meet. Diplomacy failed to provide the necessary economic lifeline. Then came the ultimate structural shock. In June 2025, a sudden fictional military conflict, the 12-day war, saw massive aerial strikes targeting Iran's core energy infrastructure, missile sites, oil facilities, and gas pipelines. This conflict did not lead to regime collapse, but it instantaneously destroyed the remaining economic resilience of the nation, accelerating the energy deficit and compounding the diplomatic deadlock. The systemic decay that had taken years to manifest was suddenly accelerated by a single catastrophic event.
The geopolitical shock immediately translated into economic catastrophe. Lacking reserves, facing damaged infrastructure, and still choked by sanctions, the Iranian Rial plummeted. In less than 7 months, the currency lost 40% of its value against the US dollar. For the average Iranian, this meant the abrupt erasure of purchasing power and savings. In late December, the economic frustration snapped. the catalyst for nationwide demonstration came not from the usual students or activists, but from the merchants of Tehran's Grand Bazaar. This group, traditionally conservative and often a financial pillar of the regime, led the initial organized protests. Their actions signaled that the government had broken faith even with its historic supporters. The uprising rapidly widened, encompassing activists, truck drivers, and students across dozens of cities. The state's reaction was decisive. The IRGC, viewing the protests not merely as dissent, but as an existential threat exploited by external actors, deployed overwhelming force. The government claimed 2,000 fatalities in the resulting crackdowns. Human rights organizations reported closer to 2,500. These grim figures illustrated the regime's grim calculation. The state was willing to commit mass violence to secure its survival. This was not a system preparing to collapse. It was a state consolidating power through lethal suppression.
The massive, violent uprising failed to dismantle the system. The regime's core structures held, anchored by the ideological commitment of the Guard Corps and the enduring nationalistic fear among citizens that collapse might lead to ethnic disintegration. The immediate phase of the crisis was resolved by force, not by negotiation. But the suppression merely transitioned the conflict from the streets into the opaque power structures of the state. The crisis created a profound instability in the internal balance of power. The central, unresolved question became one of adaptation. The demonstrable failure of hardline economic isolation, exacerbated by the war, could potentially empower surviving reformists to demand fundamental policy pivots. Conversely, the necessity of applying maximum force and the political capital this action cost could empower the IRGC to assume direct public responsibility for governing. The uprising succeeded in forcing this reckoning. It confirmed that long-term structural pressures, when combined with geopolitical shock, overwhelm systems designed only for stability. The consequence is not necessarily revolutionary collapse, but an inevitable internal reordering. The future of Iran will be determined by which of its powerful internal factions controls the instruments of suppression and consolidation.